Cool. Okay. So in case you were not in the room, I said it earlier, but I was like, I should just wait. If you get lost, I've made a handout for you guys in the Google Drive that I shared in the email. So for today's, you'll find it here. Tomorrow's is here, but we're not there yet. So, but that's where you can find it. And then Ryan, if they'll upload to the recordings here, so people can go back. According to the survey that was sent out when you guys all register, people are either like never used Blender or are what's the word? Very beginner at it. So today I wanted to just start with like a basic UI and get you all acquainted. Just running my where's my I'm trying to load my key press so you can see what keys I'm pressing. So you should see in the bottom left-hand corner. Great. So as I mentioned earlier, Blender is a very powerful tool. It can render, it can animate, sculpt, can do a lot of things. And this workshop's really just meant to introduce you to its rendering capabilities. And if you can produce a really nice still render, then learning to produce a animation is quite easy. So that is why the decision to do that has started. So today I'm going to go through some basic UI. So if you go to the handout, just gonna pull it up real quick. I've included some additional resources that are really useful. I use the Blender reference manual all the time. It's super thorough. It's very well organized. You can learn how to do anything here. There's also in the same thing, but just hyperlinking to some common hotkeys, and I'm going to teach you some. There's ways to do everything by clicking through series of menus, just like there is in Rhino and whatever other software you use. But if you learn the hotkeys up front, you'll become faster and more proficient. So I work with hotkeys. And then if you're ever interested in using a render farm, if you ever do animations, it's recommended just because you're pushing out so many frames. I highly recommend Render Street. It's not too expensive for a render farm and it makes everything a lot faster and smoother. But for just a still image, it's no problem to do it on your own device. Yeah, so I asked everyone to download Blender Kit before coming in. If you didn't, that's okay, but it's a really awesome plugin. I don't know if you guys have used Inkscape, but it basically, Inkscape Keyshot, same idea. It really like bumps Blender up into that category. So in my Blender, I've already installed my Blender Kit. And so if I turn on, it should, after you've installed it, it should be up here in this toolbar. And you can click the little eyeball and it'll turn on. So right now I'm in the object library, but you can switch over to the materials library, which there's literally 10,000 materials. They have full scenes that are already like built for you. You won't use that one a lot. And then there's HDRIs, which is your environmental lighting. And they also have some brushes if you are getting into the sculpting. So if you've ever used ZBrush, the Blender can do that too, right? So anyways, backing way up, I hope you downloaded that. I'm gonna follow along with my tutorial. So basic UI, first thing is the top bar. So this is your main menu. So this is where you'll do your basic file, save. You ever want to edit, this is like where you can access your add-ons. So there's a lot of add-ons that are not enabled. And as you become more proficient, you'll learn why you might want to enable them. If you ever want to edit your hotkeys, this is where you do that, and the key map. So some hotkeys I might be using will use the number pad, the like 10 key number pad. If your keyboard doesn't have one of those and you find yourself using keyboard a certain command a lot, you can just change it to a different key, right? That's an important one. This is your status bar, and it will suggest commands based on what you're doing. So as I like click and do different things, you'll see that the commands that are down there change, right? So that's just to orient you. And then another one is the outliner, which is up here. This is similar to your Rhino layers panel, right? Everything in the scene is going to appear up here. So when you open Blender, you have a default scene that's built. You have your camera, you have a light, and you have a cube, and you can see all of those things here. And so I can click on them in the scene and you'll see that they're highlighted, but you also, if you start building a lot of things in your scene, you might choose to actually select them from here. So in Rhino, you can right click on a layer and say select objects. In Blender, it's a little easier, you can just click. Something that's important that we'll be using is there's two different kind of toggles here as the default. There's a lot more that you can enable, but these are the default ones. So if I don't want to show the camera in my scene when I'm working, I'll use the eyeball. I can't see it. But the camera over here actually tells you if it'll show up when you're rendering it. So that's important because I might turn the cube off while I'm working, but then I go to render and I forget I turned it off, and then it shows up in the render itself. So yeah, if you want something to not show up in your render, you would actually click this one. The properties panel, which is down here, is where all of the magic happens, I guess. So this is what allows you to edit things in your scene. So you'll notice when I click on different objects, there's different menus that come up. So there's this basic kind of object editing one. If I like hover over it, it'll tell you this is the object data properties. So the object data properties for camera, which I can control, whether it's orthographic or perspective, I can control the lens length, all that kind of stuff. Those properties are different than if I click on a light. Now I get light data properties, such as like the power and the color of the lights. Same thing with the object, we get object qualities, right? Other things that can happen in here, we have the render. So this is where you set up all of your render settings. Again, if you hover over it, if you ever forget what the icon means. Output, that is simply the render that you're going to output. You can determine your resolution. If you're doing animations, you do frame start, frame stop. We're not going to be doing animations, so this will be 1. So there's no frames. These are your layer properties. When you render out, if you want to render out different layers, like if you think of like the clown pass, light pass, those kinds of things that you get with Keyshot, that's where you control this. The scene, these are your scene properties. And so the first thing I always do when I open Blender is I switch it to Imperial and I switch it to feet. Mainly because I usually use a workflow where I'm bringing things from Rhino, because if you're working in architecture, it's still easier to model in Rhino dimensionally. And so if you're importing, you just want to make sure if you're importing from a different software that you're importing with the units that you'll be using, right? Just your world settings, this is where you set up your HDRI and the kind of world color and different settings related to that. Don't need to worry about this one. Don't need to worry about that one. There's a lot that you're not going to use. Modifiers is more of a modeling tool. This is your actual particles tool if you ever want to do particle sims, which Blender is great at doing. And these are your physics properties. And again, we're not going to use those in this tutorial, but if you are animating things and you want them to behave like according to the rules of the physical world, gravity, cost, etc., that's where you would do that. So that's your basic, oh, and then material tab will be important. This is where you set the materials for your objects. There's also other tabs up here where you control that, but if you're ever working on your scene and you want to change something quickly, this is how you access that. So that's your overall properties panel. Anything you want to edit about objects will be over here. The other thing is the sidebar, and you can access that by clicking over here, but also with the hotkey N. And this one I use a lot for positioning things in my scene. So if I click my cube, I can use this to change its location and space. Same thing with like rotation and scale, etc. Right? So that's a good one. And then we also have your viewport shading toggles up here. So the default when you open Blender is going to be the solid view is what they call it. And then you can kind of switch to wireframe. This one is a material preview. So it will just show the material of the object, but it won't show the lighting in the scene. So let me just change the color of the material so you can see. So that's me changing material, shaded mode, material mode, and then this is like rendered mode. It's a render preview, so you start to see the shadows showing up on the object because it's picking up this light source that's over here. And up here, we have some other toggles. This one is one I use a lot. This is your snap. So if you enable it, maybe change it to vertex, just add another object to the scene, which we'll get into how to do that in a minute. If I start moving things around the scene, you'll see that we can snap. And also up here, if you're used to using the gumball in Rhino as a way to navigate and move stuff around, you can actually enable that in Blender. So if you click up here, you see the tab for gizmos, that's what they call it. So if you enable move, rotate, and scale gizmos, now you have your Rhino gizmo. And if I have the snap to vertex enabled, it also will react to those snaps. But if I have it disabled, now I can kind of move freely. That's an important one. And you can change whether you want to snap to the vertex, the edge, the face, you know, it gets kind of complicated. Over here is your toolbar, which contains your basic tools. So we have your select box. A lot like Rhino, you can kind of drag a marquee around things. If you click and hold this, you can use different types of selection tools. Yeah, and up here, there's all of these different tabs, and you can even create more. These are your workspaces. So the default is the layout workspace, but they have different workspaces that basically just have presets that pull up different things that are most useful for different types of tasks in Blender. So there's like the layout one, the modeling one, which will have different things. If you're going into sculpting, see how it changes and like pulls up these sculpting tabs. UV editing, which will pull up this like tab where we can see the UVs when you start to unwrap and texture things. One we'll use a lot is the shading tab. So with this material, if I click on it, the way that you build materials in Blender is through a series of nodes. So if anyone's used Grasshopper, it's kind of a similar setup of kind of trailing nodes through. So yeah, for us in these contexts, I would mostly work in layout and shading. So if that's complicated for you, just we can do those. Now I'm going to go through some basic navigation. So to orbit around, which is what I'm doing here, you just hold down your middle mouse key. To pan, you hold down Shift and your middle mouse key. To zoom in and out, Control and middle mouse key, or you can just scroll. If you want to snap to your orthographic views, all you have to do is, you hold down Alt, right? So if I hold down Alt and I'm holding down my middle mouse key, I'm able to like snap to different faces. And this is really useful, especially in this exercise where you'll be kind of moving and laying out objects. Sometimes you're going to want to look at it from a plan view quickly, or side view. And to snap out of that quickly, you just go back to your middle mouse key. Then yeah, to select things, you just click, or like I said earlier, you can click here. And you can also rename these things so it's easier for you if you want to like start to arrange your objects in the scene and they're specific things to you. They don't have to be called Cube 01, for example. And then some basic hotkeys. So I already showed you the gizmo as a way to like move, scale, rotate, but you also can use the hotkey to move, G, S to scale, R to rotate. And really about how your brain works, whether you're more of a gumball person or you like to use keys. Something else in Blender is like once you start enabling those different actions, you can constrain that movement along an axis. For example, if I hit G and then I hit Z, now it's only moving on the Z axis. G, X, now it's only moving on the X axis. Same thing with like scaling on the Y axis. And again, all these things can be controlled in this transform panel over here, which is why I was like, oh, it's important because you can kind of type these things in and not even have to use any keys. So there's a lot of ways to do things in Blender. If you want to restrict movement along only, like if you want to only move on 2 axes and restrict movement on the 3rd axis, which again will be really useful for you when you're laying stuff out. For example, if I want to move it on the X and Y and not the Z, I could just hit G Shift Z, and now I can move it around in space. Sorry, G Shift Z, and now I can just move it, but it's not going to move up or down. Something else in Blender, this is what we call object mode. And you can kind of see that up here. It says object mode, and that means when I click on the objects, I'm just getting the total object. You can toggle into edit mode by hitting tab, or alternatively, if you're not a hotkeys person, you can click here and go to edit mode. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to actually start manipulating the object, right? So before, when I'd click on it, I can only move the object around in space, but now I can move the vertices, the edges, and the faces. And so to toggle between different things you're editing, right now I'm in vertex mode, you can click up here. So if I switch to edge mode, now when I click on stuff, I'm editing the edges. Face mode, now I'm editing the faces. But there is a hotkey for that too. So if you hit 2 on your keyboard, that switches you to edge mode. If you hit 3, that switches you to face mode. And if you hit 1, that switches you to vertex mode. So if you work faster with keys, that's a pretty quick one. 1, 2, 3. And yeah, I guess some like other things while we're in edit mode that might be useful would be like some basic commands like extrude, which you have to go into face mode for that. And if you hit the E key on your keyboard, now you're extruding. And now we're modeling something, you know, we're like moving stuff around, we're going to 3, we're extruding again. And same thing before, like what I was saying about constraining movement. I'm extruding, and I also can like click X on my keyboard, and now I'm extruding along the X axis, or Y, or Z, which comes out kind of weird. The default extrusion is going to be perpendicular to the face. So that's what we get here, right? So that's like basic modeling, which you probably won't get into, but good to know. So how do we add objects to the scene? If you hit Shift A on your keyboard, this is going to bring up the add menu option. And this works not only in our layout, but also in our shading. When we're building all of the material nodes, you can add those things using Shift A. So if I want to create a plane, for example, I will use Shift A and I'll click plane, and it's really small. So I'll immediately hit S on my keyboard and just scale that up a couple times and make it really big. So like if I wanted to create a backdrop for my object, since we're making like still life images, right? I'd scale this up. I would toggle into edit mode. I would go to edge, I would click on an edge, and I can extrude that edge. And if I want to constrain that movement along the Z-axis, I hit Z. And now I have like a backdrop. But if you've seen backdrops, a lot of times they have like a nice swoop on the bottom, a bevel. So I can click this edge. The command for bevel is Control B, and you'll see it starts to bevel. And if you want more subdivisions for that bevel, then you can start scrolling on your middle mouse, and you get a lot more subdivisions. So now we have this like backdrop for our object. And so you can kind of see on this object all of the different faces here. You can right click on the object when you're in object mode, and you can say shade smooth, and it's going to smooth all that out. Not everything looks great when you shade smooth. Like these are pretty simple poly surfaces with no kind of edge defining. So if I shade smooth on this, it's going to look really weird and broken. So if you ever want to shade smooth on something, you need to first bevel the edges. So for example, I would toggle back into edit mode on this. I would select everything, and to select everything, you just hit A. And here you can, yeah, if you hit Control B, and then you can start to bevel those edges out. Now when I shade smooth, it'll look a lot nicer. Kind of a weird object. So that's basics on like just how objects in Blender work. Before I go on, does anyone have questions about anything that just happened? I don't know, like, can't see anybody, so I don't know if I'm going too fast or how we're doing. I don't know how beginner everyone is at Blender, so does anyone need me to do something again?
Hey, I missed the extrusion part. Yeah.
No problem. So to extrude, so I'm in object mode. To extrude, you need to go into edit mode. And you can have like face or vertex, whatever. I'm going to go into face. And all you do is you hit E for extrude. That's it. And then when you're done with your transformations, you can hit tab again to go back to object mode.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Another hotkey I use a lot is the decimal on your number pad, which will zoom selected. I think if you want to do that manually, if you don't have that number key. That's not how to do it. I'm not sure. I'm a number pad girl. Oh, that's it. Okay. Yeah, you go to view frame selected if you can't, but I use that one a lot. Useful. Anybody else have questions or want me to review anything before we move on?
I think everybody's doing pretty good in person.
Great.
So
Cool. Then I'll move on to cameras. So when you open Blender, there's some like objects in the scene. Normally you'll delete all of them. I left them. Actually, I'm going to delete everything except for this. I'll delete everything. No, I'll leave it. Just kidding. All right, I'm gonna leave everything. So if you want to jump to the camera, so this is the camera in our scene. It was default. You can hit the 0 on your number pad, and that shows you the view that the camera is going to give you. Again, if you don't have a number pad, you can go to view camera and active camera, and that'll show you what the camera view looks like. A lot of people, when they work in Blender, like to have a split screen situation. So if you hover over here to the edge and you see that like crosshair that's appearing, that means you can now split your screen. And so what this allows you to do is allows you to work in one side and preview your camera on the other side. So I can use my move tools, just like I did before, to start situating my camera to better frame my object. And the other reason I like to work with this is sometimes when you're moving stuff around, it gets wonky and you just want to like fix it. So like the Y, like we can see this camera is tilted. The Y-axis is not at 0, it's a little bit off. So I could just like 0 that and it'll fix it. Same thing, like if you want to get really precise with your camera orientation, I'd be like 90, as close to 180. And we have like a really sharp camera view of this weird object. So that's how you move cameras around. And this is a good time to talk about camera settings. So like I was saying before, this is your object data properties for your camera. You will decide with your team whether you want to do a perspective or you want to do an orthographic. If you do orthographic, you typically have to get a little further away because it kind of makes like a, oh no, it's the orthographic scale, that's what it is. So you have to toggle the scale. So this isn't necessarily about camera placement as much as it's about the frame of the orthographic view. So But if you want perspective, then you can play with the focal length. So whether something is like kind of distorted with a really low focal length, or if something is like more flattened, right? So it will be kind of a compositional choice that you'll make. This is also where you can play with the depth of field, and you can actually tell Blender to choose a focus object. So I'll choose my cube, and then you can play with the blur, which we'll need to go into like a render preview to see the effect of. But we don't have anything else in the scene, so maybe it's hard to see. If you ever start toggling this stuff, by the way, you can right click it and you can reset to the default value. Alternatively, you can hit backspace. So if I'm like here and I click it, or I hover over it and I hit backspace, it'll reset it. That's a useful one that I use a lot. That's camera. So this is where you set your camera settings. So maybe it's a little bit non-intuitive, but if you want to change the actual aspect ratio of your camera, you don't do that in camera, you do that in output. So I go to my output tab, and you'll see here we have like the resolution. That's why we have a rectangle screen or a rectangle render output, because it's 1920 by 1080. To start with your resolution, I would say for test renders, like I think I would like to start with a square-based render. Maybe that's because I am a child of the Instagram age, but I think you'll decide with your team what is best for your composition. But that's where you play with that. But when you're doing test renders, I would keep that resolution low, but not too low. Like I think somewhere in the 1000 to 2000 range is appropriate for test renders, so you can see actually how the lighting looks in your scene. But when you go for your final, it's a math calculation. So if you're printing at ITS at 300 DPI and you're printing a 40 by 40, that's going to be 12,000 by 12,000 pixels. Quite large, but that's how you do that, because DPI, you don't know, stands for dots per inch. So when you decide your final output and decide what you're going to print at, that's how you're going to do the calculation for this number. But when you're in screen space, screens don't really get higher than 1,000 or 2,000. So you're just like wasting time if you're going to be rendering out higher than that. And like I said before, this is actually really important to switch your frame start and your frame end. All of this should say 0 when you're making a still image. If you don't do that, when you go to export your image, it's going to export 250 frames, which is the default. And because we're not doing any animation, you're going to get 250 renders of the same thing. So that's just going to waste time on your computer. Down here in output, also, you will want to change where you're outputting to. So the default file is a temp file somewhere in your C drive, where I've rendered things out before, apparently. But you're going to want to create some kind of file for this workshop. I created one here. Create a new folder called demo 2. So I already had one called demo. And this is going to be where I will direct all of my default output to. And you're also going to want to uncheck overwrite, so that if you start doing iterations, they don't overwrite each other. I think that's it for setting up your render itself as far as like output goes. Now I guess I kind of want to talk about the workflow for getting objects into Blender. So if you've downloaded your Blender kit, then you already have a whole library of objects to play with. So if I turn this on, if you see a lock by it, that means that it's asking you to upgrade. And if you choose to do that to unlock more objects, you can, but this is a massive library and there's plenty for you to work with for free. So if you go to the filter tab and select free first, it's going to show you all the free stuff first, and you can just work within that. So I want to find lipstick, for example. I got like tons of options. Well, not tons. Okay. There's like 4 options of free lipstick, but that's maybe enough to work with. So all you have to do to add that to your scene is double click it. And you may not be able to see it because it's always going to insert the lipstick at the origin, the cursor spot. So it's currently underneath this cube. So this is where I might want to like turn this off and also select my lipstick so that I can see it. It's so small. So here we can see it. And when you bring some of these objects in, they're going to have sub objects. So there's like the cap as an object and there's the stick as an object. So you can kind of move these things around separate, but if you select the top layer, it's going to move all of it at the same time. So in my mind, in an ideal world, all of you would be able to find all of the objects you're going to use right here in Blender Kit, because it will save you so much time to just pull from this world of objects. I mean, they pretty much have everything that you're looking for. They have like pre-rendered cats. But in the event that there's something very specific you're looking for and you have to find it in another location, I'll show you how to import objects. So I use Turbo Squid a lot. For objects, they have some really good ones. And there's some websites seem sketchy to me, and this one is not. So what am I gonna type in? Maybe like donut. Same thing here, you can toggle to only show the free objects. Yeah, then we get all of these. And you can also sort by formats, which is great. You can actually download Blender files, and then you can download other types of files. So it's important to know what Blender can actually accept. And I actually think it can accept all of these that it's showing. So if you want to know what kind of objects Blender accepts, you can go to File, Import, and these are all of the object types that you can import. I usually use OBJ, but some other common ones you might find models of are STL, FBX, GLB, sometimes DAE, but yeah, you can do OBJ if you want. So pretty standard one. So if I click on this donut, and download it, it'll ask me to log in, or you might have to create an account, or you might already have one. And so this one actually has a lot of options that I can go with, but I'm going to download the OBJ, so I can show you how to do that. Move to. And you might have to unzip it. Right click. And extract all. Hello. Oh. It's popping up somewhere else on my computer that I can see. Oh, it's over here under my Zoom. That's why. Cool. So then when I go back to Blender, and I want to import it, File, Import, and import an OBJ, and that will be known as like a wavefront. And then I go navigate to that file, get my donut OBJ, and I can import it. And now you can see it. And looks like it's at the same scale, which was a good sign. And G-Shift-C to move it around. And this is where like holding down Alt to snap to that ortho becomes useful, because I might want to see when the object is like flat on the ground, so that you don't get shadows of something floating that you don't necessarily want to be floating. So that's how you import objects from anywhere that you want to download them. And I think a lot of you probably work in Rhino, so I did want to run through the workflow of exporting from Rhino in case there's something, you know, I encourage you guys to bring in other things that you want to model if you feel so compelled. So I'll show you how to export and import into Blender from Rhino. Actually, I think I already prepared file for this demo rendering. Bear with me. We open files. It's amazing, like I've been using Blender since 2016. And it's just become, the user interface is so much better now, and it's also become a lot more friendly with importing and exporting from other softwares. So this was a model that I made for something. Not important what it was for. When you're exporting from Rhino, if you have something, if you're trying to keep it in place, then like keep it in place. But if I just wanted this object to go into Blender, I would actually recommend putting a bounding box around it, moving this object to my origin. And then basically, all you have to do to export is type in export, go to OBJ, where is it? And then I'm going to type demo. And then for my options, it keeps coming up on the other screen. Okay. For my options, you can keep all this the same. So we'll keep our geometry as polygon mesh. That's what we want. For formatting, you're going to want to make sure that you check map Rhino Z to OBJY. So basically, this is very complicated, but softwares like Rhino use a different coordinate system than softwares like Blender, Maya, Keyshot even, like all those use a different system. So you want to map your Rhino Z to OBJY. When you export for naming, you want to export your layers as OBJ groups. This will show up in your Blender layers panel, grouping objects by layer. It'll make it easier to select. And then you can say okay. And then this will pop up. We already went through that. So this is like really up to you. If you have a simple geometry, you can do fewer polygons. If you have a lot of curves, you might want to do more. These are simple curves, so I'm just going to do it somewhere in the middle. Not an exact science necessarily. And then the same process that we did here, we'll go to File, Import, OBJ, and then go up to, what's that, export here? Yeah, I exported here. And then the other thing you want to watch out for on the import side of things is you want to make sure that you split by group, because that's going to translate that layers to group and then split by group instead of object. And then you can leave all of this the same because we already did the coordinate system conversion on the Rhino side. If you want to play with the scale, that's up to you, but I leave all that alone. And then I say import. Where did we go? Oh, I know what I did. So it's gonna be way off of my what's it called? Way off of my origin. And this is something to check in your Rhino if that's the case. It's not a big deal, but I don't think that my C plane was at the origin. I think I moved my C plane. So yeah, if I do this whole export thing again, just to show you how important the like location that you export at is. I'll just leave all this alone. And just undo all that. And go back, File, Import, Wave front. There you go. Now it's at my origin where I wanted it. No big deal. You can like move it around, but sometimes it's easier if you want to like build something and then it comes in the place that you expect it. So that's like workflow for getting objects into Blender. So there's 3 ways. Model something in another software and bring it in. Download something from the internet and bring it in. Use the giant library of objects available on BlenderKit and bring it in. Tomorrow I'm going to dive into materials, lighting, and like more actual how to produce these images, all the render settings, but I really wanted to acquaint you guys with like how to get objects in here and how to start arranging them and moving them and manipulating them. So I guess the task for you tonight is to divide and conquer with your team and start trying to collect as many objects as you can, like bring them into the Blender file. So that way tomorrow when you start iterating on composition, you can just kind of like pull from your library and pull them into different scenes and start building out some options. So that's all I had on the agenda for this tutorial today. So if anyone has any questions about anything, wants me to redo something, wants to know how to do a specific thing relating to object manipulation, now would be the time to go over that. How to bevel edges of the entire object, how to select faces, to extrude, how to split screen. Cool, yes, those are important ones. So in Blender, whether you're in edit mode or you're in object mode, if you hit A on your keyboard, it's going to select everything in the scene. So in object mode, it's going to select everything in my scene. I add in cube. And I click the cube and I go into edit mode.